welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 54th episode, our guest is Dr. Elizabeth Yuko. Dr. Elizabeth Yuko is a bioethicist and the health and sex editor at SheKnows, as well as an adjunct professor of ethics at Fordham University in New York City. She specializes in reproductive and sexual health ethics and the intersection of ethics and pop culture. She has been published in the New York Times, The Washington Post, Rolling Stone, and The Atlantic, among others. And now on to the show.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Is it Frog and Toad?
Yeah.
Frog and Toad,
Yeah.
Different one.
Yeah, Frog and Toad are friends, and then I forget what the other one's called, but yeah, just whatever the claymation Frog and Toad is, so he's been loving
The same Frog and Toad from years ago?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
That's
sure.
nice. I'm glad they're still friends.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I read a thing in The Atlantic. Apparently, the author of that came out to his family as gay later, and they kind of figured out that this was his way of coming out. So, kind of an interesting backstory on that. But but so they were more than friends, I guess. But in the end, anyway.
Oh my goodness, it's just like Barry Manilow.
Yeah, right. Like, let me grab my fainting couch with non-shock on that one. But anyway, let people know whatever you want them to know about you here to start out with.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
My name's Elizabeth Yuko. I am a bioethicist, and I'm now the health and sex editor at SheKnows, a women's lifestyle site. And I also am the adjunct professor of ethics at Fordham University, where I teach a class on ethics and pop culture.
Okay, cool. And now I know from seeing your TED Talk a little bit what bioethics are, but I wasn't that familiar with it before I started watching that. So maybe if you could do a quick capsule for people that don't know what bioethics are.
Sure. This comes up a lot. It's not just you. I guess that's kind of why I wanted to use sitcoms like The Golden Girls and Seinfeld and other shows to teach about bioethics, because it's something that we're all familiar with and we all deal with, just not, with the official words. So it's really any difficult decision regarding medicine, human body, any sort of medical treatment diagnosis. So basically all the difficult topics no one wants to talk about. So stem cell research, end-of-life issues, experimental treatment, any sort of assisted reproduction technologies, abortion, when does life begin and end? Those sort of fun questions. So, for example, this morning I'm working on an article on the new 23andMe FDA-approved DNA test kits that can test for up to 10 diseases. And so from a bioethics perspective, I'm basically saying, okay, this happened, but let's think about your privacy issues. Where does your information go? Let's talk about, you're getting these results in your own home, outside of a medical context. You have, appropriate counseling, so basically things to think about, with any medical decision that you make, kind of really just a fancy pros and cons list, and
right.
alerting people to things that they might not have thought about for their decision-making process before.
Yeah, definitely. Now, with that 23andMe, I read something where they were like, this might not be super accurate, too, because they're not drawing from a big sample size when they're comparing you to people. Like, they only have a couple hundred people that they're drawing from. Is there something to that?
Yes. I mean, even genetic tests like this, where they're looking for specific markers, even when you get it done in a doctor's office or, under optimal conditions, they're still not 100% accurate, just because a marker's there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to turn into whatever that condition is. So it's when you get the testing done in a medical facility, you take the results with a grain of salt, and then in this condition with the smaller sample size that you just mentioned, you should really be taking your results with a pound of. I mean, it's with lots and lots of salt, because
right.
It's and so I'm concerned that people will get these results and start panicking. And I guess on the flip side of that, there's the knowledge is empowering, which is totally true in a lot of situations, especially in terms of being informed about what you actually have and treating yourself. But with something so unsure, I don't know if it actually is knowledge and information that's, quote unquote, empowering you. So, I mean, where we are right now, if this were to, improve and progress, that might be a different story. But based on what we have at this moment, I don't know how empowering it would actually be.
So I watched your thing about the Golden Girls, and I thought that was interesting. You were talking about how that show allowed people to talk about things that they wouldn't be able to talk about on other shows simply because of the demographic of people that were featured in the show. Is that basically what you found?
Yes, I think, especially because this was the 80s, and ending in the early 90s, especially topics regarding sexual health and just sex in general, because the women featured in the show were a little bit older, and they weren't graphic. This was not Sex and the City. They weren't, using anatomical terms when they were discussing things, but they were being pretty open and frank about what they were doing or what they hoped to do. And these are things that got past the censors because they just weren't expecting things like this to come out of in Sophia's case, an 80-something-year-old, I mean, not the actress, but, the character's mouth. So, yeah, absolutely. And also, from more of a medical perspective, because the women were more mature, they had more potential medical issues. So that gave more opportunities for them to go to the doctor, for them to, talk about what's going on in their lives with each other and sometimes their children, but usually not. And so you just basically have more medical problems popping up in a show about, retired people as opposed to, 6 friends in New York City in their 20s living together in an apartment. So, I mean, certainly there'll be another set of medical issues there, but, with the Golden Girls, they were able to touch on end-of-life issues, organ donation, or, Blanche's sister asked her for a kidney, and she had to decide whether or not she wanted to give it to her. Sophia's friend got Alzheimer's. So these are things that wouldn't have popped up also in other shows.
Right. Now, do you see an equivalent to, not that there's any equivalent to the Golden Girls, I don't want to say that, but is there any equivalent in the kind of modern TV landscape that you see that's also discussing, I don't know if you've seen that Frankie and Grace show on Netflix, but I thought that had some connections there possibly, or do you think we're just not living in the same time period now and we don't need the cover of, having that special situation to talk about these things, whereas we can just talk about whatever we want now on TV?
Both.
Okay.
So, yes, I have seen Grace and Frankie, and yes, I very much, I appreciate Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin in any context, really.
Of course.
But yeah, no, this was especially from a mature person's sexual health perspective. I think this is, they're doing a great job of talking about real issues and, logistics and, things like that might not be they aren't really on other shows. So from that perspective, absolutely. But also, I think, to your second point, TV has changed so much, and so things don't have to be, thinly veiled as something else. We talk about things a lot more openly, and in terms of, and of course there were medical shows at the same time as the Golden Girls. St. Elsewhere, I think, was on at the same time, and probably one or two more. So there were definitely shows where drama was caused by medical conditions, but because those weren't comedies, I kind of put them in a separate category. But now we have those plus even more in Grey's Anatomy and House and, well, that's not anymore, but all of just a whole new crop of those. And for a while, Scrubs, where you did have the comedy element combined with the hospital and difficult medical decision making components. So I guess in short, no, there's nothing exactly like it, but I don't think that would work. For a while they had Hot in Cleveland on TV Land, although that was a totally different show because these were mature women who looked like they were 25. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was, their whole thing was about being young, so they weren't necessarily going to be talking about their aches and pains and, health conditions, because that was kind of, not necessarily the focus. But even that wasn't, it was great. Betty White was in it. She was fantastic. But I don't think there could ever be another Golden Girls for not just writing and acting, but just time period.
Right, absolutely. Now, the other way I was familiar with your work was the New York Times piece I read. What the title was, "When You Look Pregnant But You're Not." That was pretty interesting to me. Only because but especially because my wife is pregnant now, and people do seem to feel. I mean, this is somebody who is even pregnant, and they just feel so entitled to just reach out, and it's like, what are you like? No, stop! Like, what? You can't touch me in public without asking. It's like, it's amazing how entitled some people feel with they see a certain type of person or whatever, and they just feel, okay, I can violate your space. What is up
100%.
with that? Yeah.
Oh my God, I wish I knew. From that, there was kind of like a twofold thing that annoyed me. One, obviously the physical touching.
Sure.
Don't touch anyone in any context. Yep. I don't care what their body shape is. But as soon as a woman becomes pregnant, we as a society, all of a sudden, like, go into this, like, a child is coming. Maybe she doesn't know what she's doing. So her body becomes public property, and people think that they're entitled to touch it. So that's number one. And number two is the unsolicited advice, which, I mean, both of them are bad, but this one, like, especially annoys me because it's, perfect strangers, like the guy I encountered on the bus who told me to sit down because I was standing up and texting on a bumpy bus ride, and that was hurting my non-existent fetus. And the fact that someone I don't know, who does not know my background, doesn't know anything about me, felt the need to say something to me in a public setting about me not being a responsible fake mother. It blew my mind, and stuff like that happens all the time. And I'm sure your wife's encountered things like this too. Maybe not as obvious, but kind of just subtle. They often come in the form of questions, like, "Oh, so you are doing X, right?"
Yeah.
Or so you've already, so of course you're going to be breastfeeding, right? So it's this culture of not trusting women, even though.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I think this even extends to actual children when they're actually running around and actually after the pregnancy too. I think this extends beyond then, because we've been in line at like Target or something, and like my wife will literally have to like turn around to people and be like, "Stop touching my son!" Like this one person was like, "Oh, but he's cute," and it's like, that's not an excuse. You can't just touch people because you think they're cute. I can't touch people because I think they're cute. Stop it. He's a human being. He's a small human being. But stop. It's like, is there something where they feel like anything that's not, I don't know, like what it extends to children, I feel like too, so.
Well, I mean, your son was kind of asking for it by being cute. I don't know what he was wearing that particular day, but I mean, it was clearly provocative enough.
Yeah, clearly it was his fault. Yeah.
So, try to address that moving forward, please. You're totally right. And I've noticed this a lot breastfeeding is a big issue in terms of, people shaming people who don't. And then also babies who can't stop crying. I mean, if a parent, doesn't matter, a mother, father, whoever, can't get a baby to stop crying, that's not necessarily because they're doing a bad job. There could be a lot of factors. And I've heard a lot of comments on the subway in public about, she can't control her child, or, that. Or even the question, is your baby good? Do you have a good baby? I'm sorry, what? What does that even mean?
Yeah. Yeah, he's a bad baby. He wears sunglasses and hangs out with the wrong babies.
Right, exactly. He's only 4 months, but I find him very morally flawed already. That's how? No. Just don't ask people if they have a good or bad baby. Anyway.
He's irredeemable.
Exactly. But this is so pervasive and so common that we don't even think about it. This is just normal conversation. And I think that's something else I address in the piece is that, it's someone... Even if you're not going to be touching someone, which you shouldn't be, if you think someone's pregnant, you don't necessarily have to start off with congratulations or when are you due, because A, they might not be pregnant, B, there might be a million other circumstances that are happening, that they might not want to talk about it. Yeah, so but that's just it's seen as polite. Like you see someone who might be pregnant, you congratulate them. Someone might be pregnant, not by their own choice. We just don't know the backstory to everybody, and what we see, or what we've been conditioned to think, is just polite public discourse is actually kind of damaging, usually to women.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like, it's like all of a sudden, like, because I think you're in this state, not even knowing for sure, I am suddenly qualified to give you advice about your life. One thing I really want to talk about, just because I just got done listening to this, but I saw on your Twitter, I followed it to your article about S-Town.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what did you think of that, first of all? I was super enthralled with it, but I definitely had a lot of questions after I got done listening to it here, so.
Same. Yeah, I couldn't stop listening to it. It just went everywhere, which I think, as a journalist, that was pretty realistic, that sometimes you start off investigating a story, and that does not end up being the story at all. You just run into a dead end, but something else ends up being the story. So from that perspective, I thought that was realistic. I also thought, which I think I mentioned in the article, that the portrayal of his, not that he really had an official diagnosis, but that John, the main character, his mental health was just very complex and multifaceted. There was no quick, he has bipolar depression, give him, if he would have not been on this medication, his life would have been saved. No, he had, there was mercury poisoning piece, then there was, the, not necessarily BDSM, but the church ritual, the therapeutic pain component, and then the fact that he was semi-closeted for so many years, and there was just, it was very complicated, and I appreciated that they didn't just slap a label on him. And I think real life mental health diagnoses are usually complicated like that too, so that was realistic. From a journalism ethics perspective, I still keep thinking about it, what I would have done in that scenario. I don't know. I don't really have any good answers. It made me uncomfortable that, especially towards the end when Brian Reed, the host, said, this was said off the record, but because, XYZ, I'm going to, say it anyway. I'm not saying that was the wrong decision. It's just something that, as a journalist and an ethicist, I would have, that would have been a really difficult decision-making process surrounding that, and probably ultimately I would have erred on the side of respecting his wishes. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so much in there.
Yeah, well, I was reading something about how it was that maybe this shouldn't have been made because it was, invasive in a way which he didn't necessarily invite when he, contacted this, the radio show or whatever. I think he wasn't contacting them to do a extensive, exploration of his own mental illness or whatever, or perceived mental illness. He was contacting them for this other reason, and, they, kind of went in these other directions. So, I mean, do you think they were wrong for going that direction? I mean, it was kind of a left turn there, obviously, at the end of episode 2 that you kind of take. You think you're going to be a murder mystery, and then you go into this other direction. So, do you think they were wrong for going where they did?
I was listening to the end of episode 2 on the subway, and I audibly gasped when they revealed that he had just killed himself.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where I thought it was quiet, but it really wasn't, because the rest of the train looked at me. I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'm okay. Just shocked. I'm sorry. There's a great article in Vox, I think, that...
that was the one I read,
Okay, yeah, that it was a great podcast, which should have been made. And to be honest, that was... As soon as I finished listening to it, I'm like, I wonder if anyone's written this particular article, and I found that Vox article. So I was like, oh, that's something I don't necessarily have to write because someone's already done it. Anyway, consent is always a moving target and a spectrum. So just because someone consents to one thing doesn't necessarily mean you have a blanket consent to all sorts of things. So that was a concern, because, as you mentioned, John signed up for a murder mystery, not necessarily the exploration of his life. Having said that, I don't know what the behind-the-scenes consent process looked like. I don't know if, John signed some sort of release form saying, you could use this story and anything else we discuss is fair game. I mean, typically when you're speaking on the record, whatever you say on the record is, fair. And so John did, I'm assuming he knew these phone calls with Brian were being taped. He did disclose a lot of personal information about himself. So using that, I mean, I think technically it would be okay, but the whole shift in narrative, I think, is a different story. So I don't know if that, again, I don't have a great answer because, I mean, maybe some good will come of this being, out there in the world, and especially in terms of raising awareness of mental health conditions or lack of access to mental health care in the South or in rural areas, or make people feel less alone. So now that it's out there, I'm trying to look at the positive side because we can't, take it back.
Yeah, right. And one part of your article I thought was interesting about how mental health care is hard to get in rural areas, and it just kind of made me think of, years ago, we would have somebody like this, and we'd just be like, oh, he's just eccentric or whatever. He just lives on the edge of town, and he's got these quirks. He's a quirky guy. What are you gonna do? But now it's like everything has a name and like that. So I feel like it's still kind of like that in a lot of rural areas where understanding of mental health, especially, is kind of low, and people don't really get the nuances or whatever. So maybe that's a good thing that it will shine a light on. That maybe there are parts of the country, especially super rural areas, where there's not access to this mental health care where there should be, and people need to understand that. So
definitely, and also the stigma component that it's still very stigmatized even to talk about in a lot of places. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the article or not. Before I lived in New York, I was living in Ireland, where mental health care is a lot more stigmatized than it is here. And just having spent several years in that culture where, you don't necessarily want to talk about it, and depression is seen as a weakness or some sort of flaw, as someone with mental health issues living, in somewhere where it was highly stigmatized, that doesn't help. So I think the fact that this exists and is out there, and when it's popular, but popular with the NPR set, so I don't know how widely popular it can be, but
yeah, I guess people like me in the rural area are probably already hip to the things that we need to be knowing about, I guess, in that respect. I don't know if the guy at the gas station is going to listen to S-Town and be like, oh, finally.
Right, exactly. Like, oh, I should really stop thinking about mental illness in that person way. Like,
thanks, S-Town.
Yeah, but I mean, really, anytime we talk about or write about mental illness, or just kind of people are more open about it, I think it just helps the overall conversation, just helps to normalize it and have it be something that's not, scary, or, I mean, in certain cases, it can be, but, that it's just another condition. Some people have heart conditions, some people have arthritis, some people have, something, a mental health issue. So, so from that angle, that's, I guess, I put that in the pro column.
For sure. Now, you mentioned Ireland, and I student taught in England, so I'm a little bit familiar with that culture. But it seems like there's a real culture of self-medication as far as that goes. Mental illness. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like we're gonna drink the problems away or whatever, and it's almost seemed like you said it's a sign of weakness if you can't deal with your own problems by yourself and just kind of grit your teeth or whatever. So it's like they don't really just stuff it down. It's like that's kind of the culture there. So when were you in Ireland?
2004. Took a quick break to finish my degree in 2005, and then 2005 through 2012.
Oh wow! Okay.
So
awesome.
a good chunk.
Yeah. What was that like? I always wanted to go to Ireland. It sounds amazing.
It was great. It was really fun. I felt like in terms of sense of humor and lifestyle, I fit in pretty well there. Very well, actually. I just really enjoyed living there. I loved living in Dublin. It was a small city, so it was very accessible. You could walk everywhere, but at the same time, because it was a European capital, you'd have, there's plenty of culture, and there was a lot going on there. I was in college the whole time I was there, so I did a master's degree, a law degree, and a PhD all while I was there. The latter two were fully funded, so that also helped because no one here was offering to send me to to college for free. So that was great. as a woman who writes and speaks about reproductive health, however, not the best place. So yeah, that was the challenge. I was the ethics advisor for the Irish Stem Cell Foundation, and that was a lot more controversial than it sounds because there was a lot of conflation of abortion with stem cell research, and it was very complicated. And yeah, there's just a lot there that when you're in it and kind of living as part of the culture, you're like, this is not good. But then now that I'm a few years removed, I'm like, God, that's really not good. Not just in terms of reproductive rights, but in terms of, they're not great with dealing with domestic violence. I have been very close to a few situations where, women have basically been beaten to death, and the guy comes in, wearing a nice sweater and a pair of glasses. They're like, oh, he looks like a nice guy, 5 hours of community service. And it's just, like, it's not taken seriously. And anyway, so I won't get into, like, why Ireland's not an amazing place for women. But, I love my time there, but, nowhere is perfect.
Sure. But even the Irish Constitution was written kind of along with the Catholic Church, so it's kind of a quasi-theocracy in a lot of ways. So, there's that element, too, that kind of informs public policy on every level, so...
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Maybe that's improving over time, I don't know, but...
Slowly. It's more as older people are dying. And even younger people might not be practicing Catholics, but because they were raised in that environment, are more culturally Catholic. So even if they don't necessarily identify as such, they might, their social beliefs might be along those lines. But none of my friends went to church. I had a very liberal, feminist, LGBT. So it's not everybody, certainly. But again, I was in Dublin, not in a small town, so I had that advantage. So I basically moved my Dublin bubble to New York.
In your coastal, whatever, different coast, I guess. No, but
I guess moving from one east coast to the other east coast.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now with Brexit, I know that some people are talking about possibly reunifying Ireland, since Northern Ireland probably wants to stay in the EU. Do you think there's any chance of that happening?
Probably not.
Not.
No, that's a lot. There's a lot going on, but I don't think that was. Yeah, I think that's a few steps beyond where we are right now, and it's not a situation where all of Northern Ireland, is dying to join the Republic again. It's definitely split, and also. I was in Belfast a few years ago and having a conversation with a friend's mother, and they would be kind of on the Protestant, happier part of the UK side. And she made a really interesting comment, which has stuck with me, which was oh, really? They want to join the Republic again, but wait till they have to deal with the Irish healthcare system instead of the NHS, which is significantly better, or other things. So and when I thought about it that way, I'm like, not that people are going to probably, go back and not betray, but, change their mind on centuries-old conflicts. But from a logistics perspective, that would be interesting. But I don't think that's going to... then again, I did not think Brexit would happen.
Right, so. Yeah, I was shocked by that too. So, but I didn't think Trump would happen either, so, you don't listen to me on anything, so...
Yeah, same.
I was like, this will be great, what? So anyway, leading into that, one of the... when we first started talking, you sent me an article about cult people that were in cults and how that relates to Trump. Can you talk a little bit about that article and kind of the relationship between the two?
Sure. I had written a few articles about cults previously, and one thing that came up as I was writing the articles in the back of my mind is that this reminds me of Trump supporters, but then I was like, no, you are just being political and emotional. That's not a thing. You're making this up. But then I was interviewing a guy by the name of Stephen Hassan, who is a cult expert and a former member of the Moonies himself and a psychologist. And we were actually talking about a totally different issue. Someone had written an article saying that cults are very empowering for women. And so I emailed him that morning. I'm like, Stephen, I know you have some thoughts on this. He's like, actually, I do. So we were doing a quick interview on that. And then he kind of broke into, I think this was pretty soon after the election, he broke into this tangent about, and he runs it's called the Freedom of Mind Institute. He runs basically an organization for former cult members and works with a lot of former cult members as a psychologist and tries to help them readjust and just heal, I guess. So he said, this is something that's coming up a lot with his clients. And so I thought, oh, that totally makes sense. And he went into, some of the details about that. And then I interviewed a few people who were former cult members and, talk about their experience. And it was terrifying, but also really enlightening, because as soon as he made that connection, my brain initially went to, his rhetoric, the way he's holding these rallies and putting, this blind self-confidence and everything like that. And yes, people said that they were triggered by that. But the thing that came up even more was how scary it was to watch the actual people, like his supporters, rally behind him. That is what reminded them of being in a cult even more so than things that he was saying, that they know that this happened to themselves once. They know that they were in a position where they were drawn in to a group that was not good for them, and now they're witnessing basically, I don't want to say half of America, that's not accurate, but like a giant chunk of America doing basically the same thing, ignoring reason and logic and blindly following someone. And they said that's the part that they found most triggering and scary. Yeah. So that was interesting, but also scary.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's getting, that was a few months ago, and I definitely don't think it's getting any better.
No, not at all.
So,
my interest in that was definitely piqued because I had interviewed a survivor of Jonestown years ago, and the things that she had told me about Jim Jones definitely lined up a lot with, the thing about, he can fix your problems, and, the charismatic leader coming in and just, you just blindly follow him, and it's like, wow, there is a connection here with how people do that. But what do you think it would take? Because I've been struggling with this myself. Like, I don't even know what to say to a Trump supporter at this point. Like, I feel like I just saw him the first time and I was like, this guy is ridiculous. And then, it's like, you're not seeing this. Like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing here? What could I say to you that, what would it take to shake them off? Or what could you even say to them, do you think? I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm at a loss, because really everything that I think is going to be like the aha moment never happened. Like, he literally went on TV, he didn't go on, he was on TV, but the Access Hollywood tapes, there's the film of him being like, yeah, I'm just gonna grab women by the pussy, like that. he bragged about sexual assault, and so that I was like, aha, we got him.
Yep.
Nope. Apparently that's not a big deal. We're okay with that.
Yeah.
And then, when the Russian thing started to surface more recently, I thought, this is going to be it. Nope, definitely not that.
Nope.
Lynn resigned. Literally nothing that I think is going to help is helping. And that's not, there's all that, but I guess, again, in my bubble, I don't encounter a lot of Trump supporters, but the ones that I have encountered, the thing I hear over and over is about his authenticity, which is code for overt racism and sexism and homophobia, that, he says what he thinks. I think there was actually an SNL sketch recently exactly based on this idea that, he could say whatever is on his mind, it doesn't matter, and, we've been living in a politically correct world for too long, and now we can finally be ourselves. But in that context, ourselves is usually people who want to say racist things or sexist things or homophobic things, and no, we've moved on from that for a reason. Like that, let's not go back to that. But because, they have someone who is saying things, and even more importantly than that, taking actions like the travel ban, and, kind of constantly threatening to defund Planned Parenthood and stuff like that. Someone, on TV who was quote unquote elected president, if he could say and do these things, then surely it's fine if I make comments about, my neighbor. No, it's definitely not. But they feel emboldened by this. And you see this even in the state legislatures. You see these radical bills, frequently related to LGBT rights. And
I live in Indiana, so yes, I'm very familiar.
Oh, super familiar then. So yeah, and there have been several state legislators who've actually gone on the record and be like, oh yeah, since Trump won, we feel like we have a new wave of support for us to get these shitty things through. What? Although they didn't describe their policies like that. It was this immediate effect of people being like, oh, cool, I can say the things I want to say again. And so I don't think reason necessarily works with that set. In terms of no. So I'm sorry, I have absolutely no good answer. And every time I think we're to a point where he's done, we are not there.
Yeah. Although the most hardcore supporters seem super upset about the Syria thing last night, which I was like, okay, apparently this is your breaking point. I don't know. But okay, whatever.
Right. But then, if something does happen and we get your delightful former governor, that's not going to be great either.
No, that's a whole nother nightmare, exactly.
That's not going to be good. So,
yeah. I don't know how he gets away with having his wife there. That wife thing freaked me out so much. First of all, he calls her mother, which, okay, whatever, that's first of all. But the only people I've known that did that were John Lennon and Ronald Reagan, and they were for their own reasons. But anyway, so that's weird. And it's like, how are you able to have a career for this long and never be in a real, I'd say most of the bosses I've ever had are women, and I can't imagine dragging my wife to work just so I'd have a 3-person triad every time I want to talk to my boss. It's like, that wouldn't work. Apparently he's never had a woman boss at all, so it's like, I don't know how this would happen. So that's not really a question. I just don't really understand how that works. But anyway, yes, you're right.
That was something when it came out, I was like, okay, I totally believe this, but I also can't believe this is logistically possible. Kind of what we were mentioning. It was, but also, yep, this totally sounds right. I absolutely can see how this would be the case.
Yeah, it's like Karen Pence hiding in a broom closet at any moment to hop out in case a woman were to. It's like, is this so he can't help it? I might do something. I don't know. Stop me! Somebody stop me!
Exactly.
How little self-control do you have, Mike Pence?
Lock on the chastity belt. Do something. I feel like there's better ways than making your poor wife be your chastity bodyguard.
Yeah, get one of those cat of nine tails like those Catholic people have to whip yourself. I don't know. Is there something you could get to bring to work? When you mentioned Planned Parenthood a little bit, and I did see you changed your profile picture to support them, and of course I support them too. But is there something maybe where we could just get to a place where we don't have to rely on the government? I know we shouldn't have to be at that place, but it seems like this is always a stick that gets trotted out every time the Republicans are in power. Oh, we're going to defund PBS and public radio and Planned Parenthood and all this stuff, and it's like, maybe we should just be funding things. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe then that wouldn't be a lever they could pull. Is there something to that? Do you think that's something we should do? Or
the healthcare issue kind of goes, that's kind of a part of the whole bigger healthcare situation in America in terms of, that's just kind of one aspect. If you can't afford a primary care physician, if you can't afford regular doctor visits, you definitely won't be able to afford a specialty visit to the gynecologist or for, your regular screenings. So, a lot of the services, or most of the services Planned Parenthood offers, also have a public health component. So, yes, of course, it's about keeping the patient healthy and, treating them if necessary, but also doing STI and HIV screenings. So, having those available, at the low cost or free, just makes it much more accessible to people. And I don't know if there would be a way to have that be privatized and still accessible? I'm guessing probably not. So I think, at least for Planned Parenthood, a lot of that I frame in more of a public health context. And in that case, I think, having funding from the government definitely is beneficial. But,
and none of that goes to abortions either. It's all for the things you're talking about. It's just for, they already can't do that. It's just Medicaid reimbursements for people visiting for other reasons, right? That's already something we've determined. So, and I never understood again, this may be not a question, just more of a statement. I never understood the whole thing with I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to do anything that will allow you to not be in a situation where you're going to need an abortion. It's like if you were serious about that, it seems like you would be so hardcore about getting, so much access, as much access as possible to these things. So I don't really understand that part of it, but anyway.
Yeah.
Then what else can you say?
I wish I did. Yeah, it's tricky. I grew up I went to Catholic school and grew up Catholic, and it was just you can't play God. You can't abort a fetus. You can't stop a sperm from fertilizing an egg. You can't there's no intervention permitted. So, if you're coming at it from a Catholic moral theological perspective, that's one thing, but I'm pretty sure a lot of these people aren't thinking that way. That's not kind of that's not the reason behind their decisions or their actions. But no, it absolutely makes sense that, if you want to help stop, pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy rates or unplanned pregnancies, make contraception more accessible. No, well, why would we do that? That's too logical. Again, I have no good answer for that. That was, during the whole, back when the Trump, quote unquote, Trump care plan was still not dead, I'm trying to think of ways to phrase this that, would, not that one comment or tweet for me would change anything whatsoever, but I'm thinking the people that would be covered, they were once fetuses. You could protect the fetus for just a little while longer, after it's out of the body, and you love fetuses. So
it's like that George Carlin quote, "I'm a birth survivor."
Yes, exactly.
But exactly. So they need to make the connection somehow, and I don't know how to do that. But you're right, it is about control, because on the other end of it, it's they don't want you to have, if you were to want to do assisted suicide, they don't want you to do that either. So it's they don't want you to have control on either end of it. So that seems to be the real thing that they're concerned about is the control, not the actual, health or safety or anything. But anyway, sorry, I'm asking too many hard questions, I guess. I just don't feel like I have answers. Some of this stuff I'm just flabbergasted. But this is what it's like to live in Trump's America. It's just constant amazement. Now, you're an editor that works with freelance writers a fair amount, right?
I do.
So what would your advice be to freelance writers who are trying to break in and get the attention maybe of editors and work with them on that basis?
Oh, this I have a lot of thoughts on, because I freelanced for a while and still kind of do some an article on the side here or there. So I guess one of the easiest thing you can do is if you're pitching a specific site, which you don't ever send, I actually got an email the other day where it was the Red Book health editor. A bunch of us just all copied in the same email. No. Do not do that. Absolutely do not do that. No.
Straight to trash.
Right. So, first of all, that's lesson number one. Don't do that. But also, read the section that you're pitching to make sure that they haven't just run an article on what you're pitching. I get so many emails that I just... I try to respond to absolutely everything, and I have actually even responded to the person who sent the multiple editor thing, because they've pitched me so many times in so many different weird ways, and I was finally listen, no, save your, if you want to do it right, you can. I'm not going to respond to these other things. This is for your own good. But check to see what they publish. So many of the emails I send out are, thank you so much for this really interesting pitch. I love the idea. So much, in fact, that I wrote about it last week. but in a nicer way. That's not professional. Kind of, but that happens so frequently, even with writers I work with on a very regular basis. Mm-hmm. So, and because of online publishing is, it's not like old newspaper days where there's a morning edition and an evening edition. Like, things are constantly being added. So even if you check the site yesterday, check it again right before you send the pitch. So that's a really big one. Don't just ask for a column. I've had a lot of people say, hey, I want to write a column for you. Okay, great. I don't know you. I've never worked with you before. I'm certainly open to those arrangements, and I do work with some amazing regular writers that I'm super fortunate to work with. But start with one article, pitch one idea. Like, let's work through this together, and then take it from there. But kind of start small and don't go in too high. Sending clear pitch emails. So not just, I want to write about the death penalty, which has literally been pitches I've received. No, what do you want, why you? So I guess, I want to hear, why should you be the one to write about this? Mm-hmm. What are you writing about? Like, in a very, what's your angle? Why now? So why is this something we should care about right now as opposed to 6 months from now or last year? And why would the audience care about it? And why would someone actually want to read about it? Because if you can't answer these questions, then it's hard for me to sell the piece to my editors and get excited about it and that sort of thing. So just sending an email saying, I want to write about arthritis in women. Great, super interesting topic. I am interested in writing about arthritis in women, but what angle? Is it? The more specific, the better. So, so that would definitely help. For personal essays, I would need to see the whole thing on spec, which I know is not great, but especially if we've worked together several times, that's one thing. But if you're cold pitching an editor that you've never worked with before, sending a 2-line pitch for a personal essay is not going to work because they don't know what you're going to say. They don't know your story. It's not like for a reported piece. So
for essays, you're saying you would want to see a more completed, or I guess the whole thing, as opposed to if you're just being pitched on like a regular story, you would just need kind of an outline. Is that what you're saying? Or do you want to see it more fleshed out in that case too?
No, if it's a reported piece or a feature or a service piece, then I don't need to see the full article because actually in that case I'd rather only hear your initial ideas because I don't want the writer to have to go off and do research and then I decide like, oh, actually this angle is better. So for that, it's definitely a quick paragraph, 100 words, a few bullet points, a quick outline, something like that would definitely work best. But if it's a personal essay, then definitely, ideally the whole thing would be good. So it just saves time instead of going back and forth like, oh, that sounds like an interesting idea. Could I see it? And then they send it over, and then you say, I have to say, I'm sorry, this isn't what I'm looking for. And then there's the inevitable, like, how could I fix it? What did I do wrong? And it's usually not that they did anything wrong. It's just usually not a great fit or, So and I guess actually that leads me into another one, is just because an editor passes on something, it does not mean it's bad. It could mean so many different things. It could mean that we have another article just like that already in the pipeline. It could mean that, from an SEO perspective, it just doesn't work for the site. There's just certain topics that we've tried writing about, and we look at the numbers, and they just don't perform well with the audience. So it could be a super interesting article and one that would work really, really well on another site, but just wouldn't be right for us. So, and that's something I understand so much more as an editor than I did when I was just exclusively freelancing, because you would have this idea and be like, I think this is so amazing, and then you'd eventually end up selling it to somebody. But it's not that it was ever bad or poorly executed or anything like that. It's just that there's so many other components going into what's selected for publication.
Right.
I'm sorry, that was a super long answer.
No, that's fascinating. So I always wonder about this. When are you supposed to talk about payment as far as like what you get paid? Because I know some places just say, you know, in the Writer's Digest or whatever, where it's like how much they would pay. But like, are you supposed to do that when you first approach them? Do you wait for them to say something? Like, what's that?
I think that differs from editor to editor. So certain publications, as you mentioned, will just have a flat rate and that's it.
Right.
There's no negotiation. It's you take it or leave it. That's it. So how I usually do it is if I approach a writer and say, I have this, which I did recently, I said, I have this topic, I had this writer in mind that I really wanted to cover it because she had written something sort of similar for me before and did a great job with it. So I just said, hey, I've got this assignment, do you want it? I would like it to be 800 to 1,000 words, I could pay you X for this. And so I initiated that one. But if someone pitches me, it would be a little bit very presumptuous if in their pitch email they said, I would like X for this. So that you would definitely wait until something's accepted. So I make the offer when I accept something. So if I read an essay or if I accept a service piece or a reported feature, I'll say, great, I'd love to publish this. I'm thinking, I usually do put a sentence with, the three pieces of information. Like, I would like it to be X amount of words, I could pay you this, and I would like this to be the deadline. Does this work for you? And then from there could be a negotiation back and forth on all three counts. But yeah, I usually put that out first.
Right. Well, it just doesn't seem advantageous at all to like throw out a number cold. It just seems like if you say too high, it's like you're gonna, nobody's gonna want to hire you. And then if you say too low, you could be leaving money on the table unless you guess the exact. You know what I mean? It's like a negotiation. I don't know how to approach, but
absolutely.
Yeah. But I guess waiting for them to say that would probably be good. So, is there any articles that you're working on that you got coming out that you want to let us know about?
I mean, in terms of today, the 23andMe kind of what you should know about this, that will be later today. What else? I recently interviewed Rebecca Skloot, author of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks.
Awesome,
which is going to be an HBO movie starring Oprah.
Sweet.
Coming out later this month. So we talked about research ethics and we talked about women's, empowering women to make medical decisions and also what it's like to get a phone call from Oprah. So that's on a lot of different bases. And so I'm excited about that. What else? Yeah, I mean, lots of different things. Another one on the pleasure gap or orgasm gap and how that's a women's rights issue. And I've done a few really interesting interviews with that. Another one on sex ed for people with disabilities. So that's, lots of different things. So, yeah. That's
sweet. So we're getting near the end here, and I always ask this, what music have you been listening to lately?
The Supremes.
Nice.
I mean, that's been a constant throughout my life, but I go through phases where I'll just listen to like similar things over and over again, and I'm actually going to go see Diana Ross in a few weeks. So in preparation, not just to study it or anything, but just because I'm excited. I've been listening to that. Although not unfortunately, because I've been listening to so many podcasts lately, my commute has been mostly talking rather than music. But
me too.
But yeah, when I'm home and cleaning or doing stuff like that, it's usually on the girl group's Pandora station.
Nice.
Or like 60s Motown. So that's
yeah, definitely.
That's where I am right now.
Yeah, I've been trying to educate my son in the classics, so we've been listening to a lot of that stuff lately, for sure. But is there anything else I didn't ask you about that you want to get in before we go?
No, I think you've covered a lot.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm glad we finally got a chance to connect here. And
I know. I'm sorry to be so difficult.
No, it's okay. It was worth it. So, yeah, I'll send you a link here later today when it's up. And, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Just
If you enjoy this podcast, there are several ways to support it. I have a Patreon account, which can be found at www.patreon.com/Rob Burgess Show Patreon. I hope you'll consider supporting in any amount. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast everywhere it's available, which includes iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, and RSS. It really helps. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. Until next time.